Church Without Walls, Naked and Afraid edition, Peyton's favorite television show. Is about dropping two people who've never met, a man and a woman, into a foreign, exotic area for a 21-day, typically, survival experience. And they drop them off naked and afraid. They get to bring two things, usually a machete and a fire starter if they're smart, sometimes a pair of goggles if they're brain dead, right?
I love that.
So this show, Naked and Afraid, it's been around for like 12 seasons. If you want to binge watch something, it's fascinating. An intense study of human nature and different personalities. And in an ironic way, it gives us a lesson about ideology, philosophy, teamwork, and even Christianity. This and more on Church Without Walls. All right, I'll be up front with you right now. I couldn't do Naked and Afraid.
You could.
But the bugs. It's the bugs. I couldn't. I don't like mosquitoes. I'm all the rest. I wouldn't mind.
You tried to turn Mike's nest and burn it in a campfire and turn the dead bodies into some sort of cream that prevents bugs from biting you.
Oh, termites?
Mm-hmm.
See, Peyton already knows that if you find termites in the wild, they're kind of a natural bug spray, right? You could rub them on your body and burn the nest, and it'll keep the mosquitoes away. Doesn't do that great of a job, though.
No.
Well, what does Naked and Afraid have to do with Jesus in the 21st century? I have no idea. We just love the show. I'll try and weave it in here because it's on my mind, and that's just how we do things at Church Without Walls. But a lot has been happening that to me is exciting. There's transformation going on in Christianity, especially Western Christianity. And I'll tell you what, atheists are excited about it because they think it's the death throes of the whole faith and the religion again. You know, they think they've been waiting for this for hundreds of years, and they think, oh, Christianity is finally going to be dead and gone. We've finally driven a wooden stake through its heart, or, you know, the silver bullet is people like Franklin Graham and Al Mohler, and they might be right on that point. But there's this transformation going on in Christianity where the old guard, the gatekeepers, are really in a tizzy over what's been going on because Christianity is kind of leaving them behind by getting back to its roots, by getting back to mere Christianity. There's a purification going on, and I think the Holy Spirit is involved in it, and it always takes a radical form to transform the church. I mean, let's face it, to turn My Fair Lady into something elegant and articulate and lovely and beautiful and kind, that's not an easy process. It takes a few bars of soap, and so that's what's been happening, I think. And I want to talk about it a little bit. It's hit the news lately. There's been a plethora of books now, 3 or 4 books, actually half a dozen books, 3 or 4 are well known, that have come out talking about women's leadership in Christianity, classically, historically, and so forth. And it's being reasserted now. So much so that I think I mentioned last week, Rick Warren, author of The Purpose-Driven Life, his church ordained 3 women last week, kind of as an affront to the Southern Baptist Convention, which they are part of, which has come out against the ordination of women because they think that Paul said so. And ironically, on Mother's Day, one of the leading voices in the SBC tweeted a quote from a slave owner a slave owner who was one of the founders of the SBC, because it's got a dark, ugly history. It's the KKK of evangelicalism that transformed itself but never really apologized. But Al Mohler thought it was a wise thing to tweet a slave owner's comment about how women shouldn't preach the gospel, which is kind of shocking. So if you see today's show on YouTube, you're going to see this tweet from James Lackey, who said, "Imagine thinking it's okay to hear the gospel preached from a cartoon tomato, but not a real-life woman." Imagine thinking it's okay to hear the gospel preached from a cartoon tomato, VeggieTales, but not a real-life woman, Beth Moore. And so you have somebody like John MacArthur telling Beth Moore to go home.
Bob the tomato.
I do too.
I almost call him potato.
Bob the tomato is a guy named Phil Vischer, and I think you'd really like him. And guess where he lives?
Where?
Back where we used to haunt all the time. He lives in Wheaton. Remember we used to go to the museum for C.S. Lewis all the time? That's where he's from.
You can't go to Wheaton. You're gluten-Wheaton.
I'm gluten-free. There's Wheaton. That was creative. Where were we? This idea, as opposed to what Paul teaches about the church, that in the body of Christ there's no male and female. Oh boy, people didn't like to live by that. They didn't like to live by that. And so they've rewritten history and they've made these formal rules to keep women out of positions of leadership and so forth. Now, I went through this as a pastor, and my father went through this as a pastor, and I probably don't perfectly agree with my father's take on this, but he ran into trouble when he had women serving as Sunday school superintendents or as part of his board of deacons. And when the trouble came to him, you're shaking the camera, hey, but I guess that's okay. If you have to erase, where's Mozart? You know, Mozart never had to erase.
Well, if you want to draw a triceratops, you need to get the bone down, and then you got to get the flesh. So
You're doing a triceratops?
The shape, and then you have to do it right.
Okay. I'm getting distracted today, but where were we? Oh, so a story about my father. You don't know Jim Kirkwood, but he started as an associate pastor in a very legalistic Baptist church, the Village Baptist Church in Buffalo Grove, where at the time I was going to that church, I was 4 or 5 years old, women couldn't wear slacks because that was ungodly, until the pastor's wife there was gifted by a very wealthy woman in the church a bunch of her old business suits, and then all of a sudden slacks became okay in that church. But, you know, it was a typical Baptist church back in the 70s where, you know, we didn't even go to a restaurant that served alcohol, you know, because what if somebody saw us there? You know, so you couldn't go to theater, you couldn't go, watch a movie. This even later in my life, when we had left the legalism of this Baptist church, my father had a church in Park Ridge Bible Church, and one day his son in the 8th grade went to a bad movie at the movie theater during the afternoon. It was like 1 p.m, and I know what you're thinking. Was it a rated R movie, or was it a XXX movie, or some gay movie house? No, I was caught and outed by a woman from the church who my mom went to her grave not telling me who it was. I've got a couple of good ideas because there was only a few families that lived around the Pickwick Theater. But I was outed by this church lady. My mom received a phone call, and on the other end of the line was the church lady saying, "Do you know where your son is?" My mom said, "No, where's my son?" "He's at the movie theater with Satan." You know, so I was outed for seeing the Apple Dumpling Gang at like the matinee show in Park Ridge's Pickwick Theater by this dear lady who was holier than thou. But this is kind of, this is the kind of evangelicalism that people laugh at today, the idea that you couldn't listen to rock and roll and you had to sneak Beatles records into the house to listen to when your parents weren't around. This is the kind of stuff, the guys giving lectures about Elvis's pelvis and all that we look at now and we laugh. We're like, that didn't happen. That couldn't have happened. Come on. And we make fun of it now, but that actually happened. How did I get on this? Oh, this whole idea that women couldn't be involved with church. And then, my father points out to these people, these gatekeepers, that Phoebe was called deacon. She was a deaconess. And the very word deacon that gives us our word deacon was used, the Greek word was used about Phoebe in the New Testament. Hama, 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 as they would say. And there was all kinds of excuses because we couldn't even, it's been 20 centuries, since Paul wrote that, or since Paul thanked women apostles in Romans 16, and yet we're so backward that we're not allowing women outside of the nursery or the coffee area in the church. Or maybe they could teach the gospel to the 4 and 5-year-olds, but not upstairs, because something changes when you walk up 13 stairs and you go from speaking to children to speaking to adults. This kind of nonsense is still, and this is why people are leaving the church in droves, because they're seeing this kind of backward nature that's ugly. And then you have other Christian scholars coming out and saying, this is not the case. And I have friends who have become Catholic over this. They said when they looked at the different Christian denominations and faiths, they realized that the Catholic tradition celebrated women. There were women saints. There were women who have feast days and so forth. And that was one of the things that attracted them about Catholicism, was that they didn't have this archaic, this non-Christ-like idea of the role of women as subordinate and submissive and so forth. So, yeah, I agree with you. I like hearing the gospel from Bob the Tomato, and if Jesus Christ said, if my disciples would hold their tongues, stones would cry out, that lends me to believe that he doesn't mind if Beth Moore points to the cross and says, let there be light. That God wouldn't mind that Rachel Held Evans swings the door open of the padlock church and says, we've got bread and wine here, come share it with us. And yet we're still fighting this battle now. And I think what the atheists are excited about is they're seeing the reaction against the gatekeepers who are trying to enforce slaveholder ideas of what the church should look like, and the church is transforming in front of their eyes. And the people who are butt shifting are the status quo, and they should be butt shifting because, this isn't exactly Luther's 95 Theses, and nothing's getting nailed to a door in Wittenberg. The internet and podcasts and books and these things that can't be controlled by these cloistered, pasty, white bigots. They're losing control of it and so forth. And that's what I want to talk to you about this morning. It's not going to be a negative thing. But Naked and Afraid is fascinating to me because it puts together people that they knowingly wouldn't gravitate towards each other in real life. This last one we saw, they put together this really kind of what would you say about the guy and the girl?
The first guy was a crazy Mormon who wouldn't cuddle with a naked lady because he was freezing to death, but he was married, but he would savagely kill every bird in the forest just to have one fire.
that's a lot to unpack right there for people who haven't seen the show. Yeah, the last episode we saw was this very devout Mormon. She says crazy because there was a lot of contradictions going on. One of them, which he was so devoted to his wife that he promised that he wouldn't cuddle for warmth with the naked woman that he's spending 21 days with naked. So Peyton brought out, wow, I wonder what Mormon theology, in her words, thinks about being naked with a woman for 21 days. So yeah, this kind of dichotomous thinking. But yeah, he was willing to kill everything in sight to survive, and he had no poor feelings about it. In other words, dominion theology, that the world exists just for me, and we can do whatever we want in whatever manner we want just to survive. And he was pitted with this environmentalist feminist. So these two extremes, right, thrown together, 21 days naked, survive in this uncomfortable climate. Where were they? Was it Madagascar or was it?
Yeah, Madagascar.
Madagascar. And so they're either going to sink or swim. They either have to work together and compromise, or they're going to be at each other's throats and tap out after 4 or 5 days, which we've seen happen on this show. I don't want to spoil your thrill of going back and watching The Crazy Mormon, as Peyton put it, but they actually make it for 21 days, and there was a series of compromises, and then there was a series of places where they shouldn't have compromised because it put them in real dire situation, especially over the cooking of two boa snakes. But
I think the spiders was where they went wrong.
Oh, the spiders too. The Black Widows, great show, by the way. A lot of good doctrine you could find there. But one of the things that you find there is that there is a transformation that takes place when people realize that if they're going to survive, they got to do it together. And they come to some kind of a thing. They might not be pleased with each other. They might annoy the hell out of each other. But if they're going to survive, they've got to get to a place where they can work together for a common goal that is larger than their egos, than their presuppositions, than their judgmental presuppositions, and going in how they feel about certain things. The feminists didn't even want to kill the egg sacs of, what was it, a black widow?
A black widow, but she would kill every other animal for a meal.
Later
she didn't even feel bad for killing a pregnant
so
snake.
So their principles had to be softened for them to survive. And I think this is the thing. You can't stay arrogant when you're fighting for survival, because you will die. And so I think this is the humility that is needed in the Christian church. I think we should throw Al Mohler naked into the Congo or the Amazon jungle for 21 days with Beth Moore, who I'm sorry to do this to you, Beth, because that sounds like a nightmare. But metaphorically, you understand what I'm saying. I think this is necessary, because if you want to talk about the body of Christ, yes, the eye can't say to the hand, I have no need of you. But it certainly can say to the hand, girl, you need a pedicure. Or a manicure. Is it a manicure when it's the hand?
Yeah.
Okay. See, I don't know these things.
Don't say to a hand that they need to take care of their feet.
Good point.
You're insane.
Manicure.
Yeah.
Girl, you need a manicure. Girl, wash your face. So, I want to show you something from Al Mohler. No, I'm sorry, not Al Mohler. Randall Rouser is one of my favorite writers, and he wrote recently, why don't we take mere Christianity seriously? So Lewis's reaction to the 40,000 different denominations we have in Christendom, all at each other's throats, was this idea of mere Christianity, this idea of embracing the fundamental aspects of the faith centered around the person and work of Jesus Christ, that we all take seriously, that we all embrace, and that we all can get behind. That is the tuning fork for true Christianity, and he called it mere Christianity, right? That's what unites us, our universals, and not those things which divide us. And why is this important? Before I get to Randall Rouser, I want to share something with you from Benjamin Corey, another very thought-provoking individual who writes some really strident articles that make you think and are a challenge. And he wrote recently that there's only two types of Christian, and you should be able to tell the difference. Now that is clickbait right away. You say, woo. When somebody says that, it almost sounds like the good and the bad and the ugly, right? There's only two kinds of people, those with guns and those who dig. Those who come in through the door and those who come in through the window. And Tuco crosses himself multiple times. There's only two types of Christian. You should be able to tell the difference. So recently he wrote this article, and it kind of started a firestorm because, I must say there's a lot of good things in this article, but it's just going to be controversial because he names names, and he basically says that Franklin Graham is the wrong kind of Christian. So let me, instead of putting words in his mouth, let me just give you a taste of it. As one who studies culture for a living, most specifically religious culture, I will tell you that technically there are over 40,000 Christian sects, S-E-C-T-S, in the world. But realistically, there's only two kinds of Christian, and honestly, I'm tired of pretending there's not. All right? It doesn't matter what kind or denomination of Christian you are. There are still only two types. One is the member of a Christian religion, and the other is someone who is actively living like Jesus. Now, before I'm too hard on the way Benjamin Corey wrote this, I must point out that my wife said to me last week, do you realize what you just did? You just told your whole audience that you don't believe they're Christian, because I said I've only met one real Christian in my life, and it was my mother. And I realized that, yeah. I realized I named names.
You haven't met some of them.
I know. The people listening? Yeah. But they're still going to take it as an insult.
Okay.
And what about all the people in our old church who are listening? They're going to take it as an insult because I met and knew them. And what about some of our family members who I didn't mention? They're going to take it as an insult, even though I included myself as somebody who hasn't lived up to the kind of definition you're about to hear from Benjamin Corey. And basically, what I was saying is what Benjamin Corey wrote this week, is that I do see that there's really only two kinds of Christian, and the 99.9% of us live in the one that calls ourselves Christian. The way we identify as Christian, but it's different than the ones who kind of actually live like Christ persistently and consistently. So he says it doesn't matter what kind of denomination of Christian you are, there's still only two types. One is a member of the religion, the Christian religion, and the other is someone who is actively living like Jesus. I don't believe the word Christian was ever intended to be used the way we use it in America. When it was first used, the term wasn't in reference to a well-crafted religion with a long list of tenets, but instead was simply used to describe people who actively did what Jesus said to do. Turn the other cheek. Bless those who persecute you. Carry the pack the extra mile. Essentially, the word meant little Christs, right? Christian, as the word was intended, was measurable, or at least observable. You could tell who was and who wasn't. And that wasn't a judgment about the state of their heart, or I'll add the length of their skirt, or either. Being able to tell who was a Christian and who wasn't was something one could do by simply observing their outward behavior. Do they follow the teachings of Jesus or not? Okay, the fruit of the Spirit isn't not going to see Don Knotts in the apple dumpling gang. The fruit of the Spirit is love and joy and patience and long-suffering. The fruit of the Spirit is blessing those who persecute you and praying for them and turning the other cheek and these other things. Do they follow, this is back to Corey, the teachings of Jesus or not? But that's not what the term has come to mean in Americanized Christianity. For many of us growing up, if you said a simple prayer at the end of a sermon and asked Jesus into your heart, you were automatically a Christian. Becoming a Christian was something done in secret in the most quiet place in your heart. You repeat the words given to you and signify your transition into the group by quietly lifting your hand with every head bowed and every eye closed. And at the end, you're part of the group. Since becoming a Christian was internal and not external, there was really no way to know who was a Christian and who wasn't. Now be careful here, because I'm not preaching works religion. I'm not preaching works over grace, and people are going to take it that way. And whether Corey's doing it, I don't really care. I'm talking about actual fruit of the Spirit, as opposed to something that he's saying that's just somebody who's saying the Pledge of Allegiance like millions of kids do every day, and it's absolutely meaningless. Absolutely meaningless. It strikes me that American evangelicals invented an entirely new version of the Christian religion with its own concept of salvation, and the consequences of this religion are dire. It has taken the message of Jesus and the biblical mandate to pattern our lives after Jesus, and in so many was reduced it to the near effortless act of accepting Christ into your heart. In fact, it's become a bizarre religion. And this is where I'm going to leave you here. In fact, it's become a bizarre religion where one can actually refer to themselves as a Christian while simultaneously disagreeing with what Jesus taught. Wow. One can actually refer to themselves as a Christian while simultaneously disagreeing with what Jesus taught. And this is why a recent theologian said American Christianity actually is closer to Friedrich Nietzsche than it is to Jesus Christ. The kind of Jesus and John Wayne thing that's going on, that's so connected to a political movement and so forth. And this kind of idea that, women should sit down and shut up. And it's being exposed now by the right circles, which is from within, because people don't listen to the atheists to expose it, even though a lot of the atheist criticisms are spot on. Christopher Hitchens' criticisms of the God I'll just come out and say it, the Calvinist God, is spot on. That God is a tyrant. And as Derek Webb said, there are some gods have earned their atheists, and that's one of them. So anyway, I want to go from Benjamin Corey to Randall Rouser, who says, why don't we take Mere Christianity seriously? So this is a hat tip to C.S. Lewis. And he says, every day people leave Christianity because they've been taught that the religion, and he's got a series of bullet points, and I'm going to give them all to you like it's an automatic weapon, right? There's like 10 or 12. Every day people leave Christianity because they've been taught that the religion requires one to reject the reigning theory of origins in biology, right? Evolution. Or that it requires one to accept that women should submit to men. Well, we call that, we've changed, we don't like the word patriarchy, so we call it complementarianism. Or that wicked people should and will writhe in torment in a lake of fire forever. Or that you need to pray a sinner's prayer in order to avoid the fiery furnace. God is Isis or Nebuchadnezzar or Nero. Or that gay people should not be allowed to marry. They've put that into what must I do to be saved. Or that Jews have been grafted out of God's plan, or that God has a special plan for the Jewish nation, a plan that justifies steamrolling the rights of Palestinians, or that serious disciples of Jesus abstain from alcohol, or that real Christians don't swear or watch R-rated movies, or even PG, the Apple Dumpling Gang. Or that Jesus died only for his special elect people. Or that God will destroy the earth in the immediate future, and thus we don't need to be concerned about environmental issues. Or that God commanded the slaughter of ancient societies, or that God's perfect law required required particular offenders to be pelted to death with rocks. He ends it with this, and on it goes. Christians disagree in good conscience on all of these topics. None of them is part of the basic Evangelion, or good news, despite the fact each of these claims, and many more, has been taught as if it were part and parcel of real, genuine, mere Christianity. Each one constitutes a significant stumbling block, an obstacle to faith, or reason to reject it altogether. And thus, including such disputed claims as part of the basic presentation of mere Christianity has wrought untold harm in alienating people unnecessarily from their faith. Here's the lesson, says Rouser. Think hard about what the essence of Christianity is. Can you do that for me this week? If you haven't done it prior, because I've mentioned this before. As a matter of fact, one of the last things I did in my last year as a pastor at Grace Gospel Fellowship, I said, I want you to put aside all of the baggage that you've brought into your reading of the Bible. And I want you to read the New Testament through with all your denominational glasses off, with all your dispensational denominational glasses off, and read it as if it was just handed to you and you're reading it for the first time. And I want you to jot down what your thoughts are. If you can, your raw thoughts from the words you see, not characterized or qualified by theologians or denominations or your favorite internet teacher. 3 people did it that I know of that came to me and told me. 2 of them were not part of our church but listened online. And that's just the nature of human beings. We don't like homework, and we're comfortable with where we are. We don't like to be challenged. We don't like to be under the assumption that, wow, maybe I've grown up under some things that aren't true, and this admonition of Paul to Timothy, test everything, cling to that which is true. We don't like to test everything. We like to have smarter people than us test it, and then we'll just follow them. But anyway, the lesson here is think hard about what the essence of Christianity is. What is Christianity? What set Jesus apart from the religion of his day? How did he challenge it? How did he treat the status quo? How did he test his scriptures? How did he challenge his scriptures? And Moses and others. Be very careful not to add unnecessary claims to the basic package, lest you fall under the indictment of Matthew 23:4. They tie up heavy, cumbersome loads and put them on other people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them. So writes Randall Rouser. Now, I'm not going to go on too much longer unless you need some more time.
A little longer.
You need a little longer. All right. So I'm going to say this. And that camera's off already. Somebody send me a cord for my GoPro so we can have Peyton Cam. So anyway, Benjamin Corey goes on to, I think unnecessarily, God bless you, Bella. Benjamin Corey goes on to, I think, unnecessarily name a famous name in Franklin Graham, and he's basically saying he's a phony Christian. And I think that detracts from the article, although I do think it is helpful to give an example, and he gives an example of what he's trying to say. And he's trying to say, is Franklin Graham's theology Jesus? Or is it Jesus and John Wayne? That's what he's coming out saying here. And if you hold it up to the words and the actions of Jesus, it's really hard to find any similarities. It really seems to underline or to make the point that he made, that you could say you're a follower of Jesus and look nothing like them and even contradict his very arguments. That's a heavy thing to do. I mean, to somebody who, millions of people follow and support and think is, the 13th apostle or what have you. and I did it in the opposite way last week by just giving you one positive example by pointing to Mary Lachlan, Mary Lachlan Kirkwood, and saying, yeah, to me, that's the clearest reflection of Christ that I've ever seen. And most of us fall short of that. So I think we're both trying to say the same thing, that the word Christian is used much too lightly. Much too lightly. I don't think, especially in the West, in the modern Western hemisphere, that Christianity has reflected Christ authentically. I think we've done a poor job, and I think the church is undergoing a transformation, and I think part of it might start with people leaving the status quo behind, whether that's not going to SBC seminaries, or whether it's leaving the typical church and forming their own house churches, or not looking to the church at all as an organism that reflects Christ, and building it from the individual to the family level on that level, and something that we can control a little better, that we don't have to apologize for at every turn. I think that might be where things start. Christianity has always been an insurgency, and when it's not, when it's propelled to the throne, it hasn't ruled well. And we could trace that throughout history. We could see the massive growth of the church up until the Roman emperor said, now it's law. Now it's now it's not only a favored religion with privileges, but it is the religion. And all of a sudden, the idea of the separation of church and state, the church became the state. Not long after that, and it did a worse job than the state without Christ did. And I don't have to apologize for that, from the Borgia popes to the religious wars, to blowing up children on buses in Ireland. I just think we have made a mess of it in places, and to deny that is just ridiculous. We need to repent of that and realize that Christianity is an insurgency against the status quo and the typical nature of men in high places. Christianity really is about friends in low places. To quote the guy who wrote that song for Garth Brooks, and it really is Tolkien's understanding of the Ring of Power. Christianity many times has taken the Ring of Power and put it on. And it turns out exactly as you'd expect, right? Where true Christianity, mere Christianity, rejects the ring, as Gandalf did, and who was the queen elf? I forgot her name. Galadriel? Who, confronted with the temptation toward power, refused it in that understanding. Well, Christianity wants to be Boromir. We want to take the Ring of Power and wield it for good, and that temptation is too strong for any of us. We were meant to be hobbits, not Ubermen. And yet we've been enthralled by the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche, and we resemble more the ugliness of Nietzsche's Man of Steel than we do a broken, humble servant, the least of these, who would bow down before his betrayer and wash his feet. And so it's not surprising to see how people outside of the faith look at that and find it to be loathsome. It was said of Jesus in Luke 15 that Jesus didn't go to sinners. That's a misnomer. Jesus didn't go to sinners. Sinners came to Jesus. Luke 15 says they desired to hear him. They came into his presence. Is that true of your church? Does your pastor attract sinners? Does your favorite internet apologist attract sinners in that way. Is your pastor repulsive to our faith leaders? Or is he embraced by them? And yes, that is a test of mere Christianity. Because the status quo will always fear mere Christianity. As Lewis points out in the Screw Tape Letters, that's what the devil fears the most, is the kind of unity that comes out of people who have differences and yet find unity within their differences. Something to get them through the 21 days of naked and afraid. And you didn't think I could weave it into the teaching today.
Well, I weaved in the Hobbit's sword.
The Hobbit sword.
You were part of...
Sting.
Yeah. I got Sting into the message because you were talking about Lord of the Rings.
That was impressive. I didn't even notice that until you pointed it out just now. Bella's making me scratch her. We're going to sign off, folks, but you're not done. I know you're not done, but just show us what you got. Show us what you got. And maybe you could show us, too, the models that were your inspiration after you show us the... Here, don't tear it out. Don't tear it out. I'll hold the whole thing up, and then you can show the models, too. So Peyton went Triassic? Is this...
Triceratops.
I know, but is this the Triassic period or the Jurassic period? I'm not sure. But she did a Triceratops and a couple other dinosaurs.
The baby Triceratops is right here. The dad's over here, and then the mom's over here. As you could see...
The mom is larger than life. Okay. Right. Let me hold up the models.
So, as you could see, the baby...
Is this your favorite dinosaur?
One of them.
It's my favorite. I love Triceratops. I
have a lot of dinosaurs.
Yeah, you got a lot of dinosaurs. They probably are not accurate because they don't have feathers.
Yeah.
They're last decade accurate, but that's okay because they're still cool to look at. You have anything to add?
Well, I do. As you could see, the baby Triceratops.
It's hard to see. We'll put the picture in the.
The baby Triceratops horns is facing that way, where the moms and dads are facing this way.
That's right.
Because
theirs face up, and the moms and dads face forward. And so one time, Wendy was going to buy Peyton a book about dinosaurs, and Peyton looked at the cover and she said, "That's not a good book." And Mom was surprised, and she said, "Well, why?" And she said, "They've got the baby Triceratops horns are pointed forward, and they're not pointed forward when it's that age. They're pointed up." And you knew that because of we were watching who was it? Two of our favorite paleontologists talk about it. The inspiration from Jurassic Park. I can't remember his name now. Great guy. Anyway, we'll see you all next week. Just something to think about this week. What is mere Christianity to you? And what do you think about what's going on in America today? The reason I'm excited about it is I think, as Joker famously once said, this town needs an enema. I think American Christianity needs an enema, and I think it's happening now, whether we like it or not. And I think it's a good thing. I think it's one of those things we're going to end up feeling better in a few years because we need to cleanse this not Jack Horner. Yes, Wendy remembered. It's Jack Horner. Jack Horner. Anyway, I think we need this cleanse. I think Christianity needs a purification, and I need. I believe with the Reformers that Reformation isn't a one-time event 500 years ago. It's a constant struggle. It's an evolution. So.
Wait. I need to add one more thing to my dinosaurs.
How long is this going to take?
Just a few seconds.
Recommendations. Randall Rouser. Every column he writes is thought-provoking, so add him to your list. Benjamin L. Corey is another one who's very thought-provoking. I don't always agree with Benjamin, but he always makes me think. And these are the people I'm attracted to, is people who make me think, who help me to test everything and cling to that, which is good. Now, I'm going to give you a series of podcasts, if you're the podcast type that you might not know about, that I think will enrich your life and certainly your spiritual growth, or maybe discernment. And they're not in any particular order of best to worst, but one of them, Peyton mentioned, Bob the Tomato, has a podcast called The Holy Post. The Holy Post is Phil Vischer being serious about elements of Christianity, some of the stuff that we've just talked about. And the Holy Post is they've got great guests. They start out talking just the 3 or 4 of them, and then they end the show with a guest. And I never miss an episode. It's well worth your time. I kind of skipped the first 10 minutes. I'm sorry, Phil. But they banter about meaningless stuff, and I like to get right to the meat and potatoes. Or the kale.
Meat and tomatoes.
The meat and tomatoes. So the Holy Post. Another one that is well worth your time is J.B. Stump, Biologos. The Language of God is a podcast. They have wonderful guests, thought-provoking topics. It's another can't miss podcast in my opinion. It's terrific, and you don't want to miss that. As a matter of fact, Wendy gave me Jack Horner. That was such a clutch thing. Are you almost done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Because if I go to my library and look at shows, I listen to Jordan Peterson, The Language of God. I've got Ear Biscuits in there. There's Holy Posts, but I'm trying to think of the Bible for Normal People. If you only add one podcast to your list right now, the other two, the Holy Post and Language of God, are awesome. But if you're going to add one this week, add Peter Enns and the Bible for Normal People. You want to go back and listen to all the episodes. You will get a great education on textual criticism and other things, and how to read your Bible and how not to read it, and so forth. So anyway, that's about it for this week. All right. Oh, is that your way to add feathers? Are they going to all fall off onto my work area when you hold this up?
Maybe.
All right. Oh, it's going to make a mess. My OCD is kicking in. You're going to need a vacuum. It's going to fall all over. You're not seeing this, folks, but her glitter glue, it's like a glitter glue, and half of it just fell off into my workspace. I'm cringing, but I want to support her artistic nature.
I love glitter.
Yeah.
And
You love
everything.
glitter like Brad from the middle. All right, folks, we've gone on too long. Thanks for watching.